Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a new homeowner association claimed that my ancient 125-year-old property is part of their fraudulent new HOA. They demand that we pay $15,000 in dubious HOA fines. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So I consider stability to be very important to raising children. In that way, I'm aware of how fortunate I was to have my farmhouse growing up. Family was always accessible and I learned so many skills, one of the most important of which is the satisfaction and pride that comes from putting everything into a day's work. As I was coming up, the world was starting to change. It was crucial to father that school be my priority. The changes in the world showed with me and my siblings and my cousins growing up. I was the only member of my generation of the family that stayed and devoted my adult life to the farm. Don't get me wrong, I don't claim to be the only thing keeping this farm running. My beautiful wife is skilled enough with finances to have built a successful career working online while keeping the farm successful as well. In any time when our financial stability was threatened, my younger sister and one of my cousins have always been willing to dip into the savings and investments they built up through their own hard work to keep us afloat. And that is not even counting all the workers and contractors that keep the farm running throughout the year when one pair of hands is not enough. This farm is fundamental to my life and I've raised my own children to learn to value the farm and the lessons this land can teach, while also making sure they learn from school how to succeed in the world beyond as well. At one time, my family knew many more of the details of the founding of the farmland and how it fell to our family's hands. We are still able to track the family back at least 125 years and find its destiny tied to the farmland. A large part of what makes the stability of this farm so important to me is just how visible the constant change is in the rest of the world. Year after year, the city creeps closer to me and developments rise out of the ground like weeds. Now the encroachment is visible at the edge of my property. I've watched a nearby housing development rise out of the ground in an impossibly short amount of time. Then again, if each house looks the same, then it must be pretty easy to pump them out by the end of the process. This was one of those developments that a few investors had plans for from the very beginning. The investors who bought the land organized an HOA for the development before there were homes to own. They approached me often during the construction and made some offers for my land. When it was obvious that sale wouldn't happen, they offered to allow me and my farmland into the HOA contract. I politely turned them down, no matter how rudely persistent they stayed. Of course, a man who owns a farm and shows a polite nature is generally considered to be a simpleton, at least in their mind. I've learned that there's plenty to be gained from being underestimated by people though. My wife was furious at some of the haughty interactions she witnessed the HOA leaders have with me, but I just kept my guard up and let them pump their houses out of the cookie cutters and into the metaphorical oven. When the development was complete, homeowners came flooding in. These homes were brilliantly located at good prices and there was even an HOA to keep all the facilities in the housing development in tip-top shape. So all the working-class homeowners could forget about any of those concerns. Being their simple redneck neighbor, I heard the grumbling start when a new president to the HOA came pretty much out of nowhere. They had worked with the investors that built this development to begin with, but they had none of the same priorities and mentality. Their focus in the past had been business investment and the beginning and end of their concerns were the returns they could get on their investments. At this same time, I started to be bugged again. The new HOA president had obviously been briefed on me because he came to visit with a casserole to gift me, absolutely horrific, thanks for asking, and a tone of voice that made it clear he thought I would be shocked that negative numbers were even a thing. He was obviously bugged when me and my wife kindly turned down joining the HOA and then firmly rebuffed letting him have a stake in our land. I recognized the concealed pout from when we didn't let my daughter go over to her friend's house over the weekend because her schoolwork wasn't done. A few months go by and I am shocked that the HOA president let things sit where they had been left. That is, until I get the first letter from this HOA. Obviously, the HOA president thought it would be too obvious for someone simple-minded like me to figure out if he claimed that I'd only missed the last 6 months of HOA dues while he was the president. So he decided to claim that I had not only been a member of the HOA for the last 2 years, but I had yet to pay my dues a single time. The first letter even kindly offered to let me off the hook for late fees. How kind of him. Of course, I tossed the letter to the side and went about my life. However, the letters kept streaming in, all past the first claim claim I had ignored their warnings and as a result would have to pay hefty late fees to make the total of what I owed them $15,000. I saw all the rest of the letters through a red haze of anger. $15,000 could completely ruin my ability to keep the farm running on its own income. I'd already tapped into my family's pockets at times, but never something like this. Even thinking that they would never be able to make me pay, I could not help but panic at the thought of if this could force me to give up my home or something. My wife advised me not to act but had some work to do in the city and unfortunately couldn't stop me. I stormed over to the HOA development after this letter claiming that I owed them $15,000 and went straight to the HOA president's horribly unhumble abode. I did not stop to listen to the secretary, and so I walked in on an important meeting that consisted of him sharing coffee with another man who looked convinced that his crap did not stink. I demanded to know the meaning of the letter. The HOA president waved off the secretary from where she followed me into the room, looking shocked. He told his friends with the cotton candy farts to stay and that I would not be there long. Then he stood up and got up close to my face. He said, "That, OP, is a consequence. Those come when you refuse to honor agreements and legal contracts. This one is large because you had plenty of time to honor your agreements." I replied, "Agreements I made before you even came to beg me to join your HOA and let you start whittling away at my family's land." He said, "That's a hefty accusation, my friend. I would prefer if we don't get emotional about this. You should understand that you may live on land that has been around for a long time, but that doesn't mean that you can follow rules that they followed back in the day that an individual farmer was actually relevant. Attacking me is not enough. Of course he belittles the entire community of farmers that keep the nation's agriculture from being monopolized by corporations." I said, "I'm not paying anything." I kept the letter in my hand, though I did crumple it in my fist and stormed out of the room. The letters then started to get more hotly worded and a few threatened the safety of my livelihood and my family. I started to get worried and considered sending my wife and daughters away to live with my sister in the city or something. My wonderful wife made it clear that they would never dream of making me stand up for my home alone, and they could all take precautions to keep everyone safe. I did not have to worry about them sending Wild West bounty hunters to my home yet. I certainly had plenty of lawyers who would have made perfect scarecrows if they didn't already have massive sticks up their butts. They tramped through my crops and even let my animals out of their fences. I had an old sheepdog that died during this period, and to this day I don't have proof, but I'm certain that they must have poisoned him or something. One of these lawyers found me working in the field one day, and I at least enjoyed the look of disgust on his face when his nice dress shoes got muddy. He came out to me looking like he was wading through poop instead of mud, and then he tossed out a few words that took any sort of self-satisfied grin from my face. He offered to explain any of the legal terms and any of the words over 2 syllables since they all thought I didn't make it past 2nd grade, but the moment I heard lean, I went running for my wife. We were finally in agreement that this was escalating to a point where we couldn't ignore them, so we hired a lawyer. The lawyer heard us out, and since he actually had ears and half a brain, he was able to tell that me and my wife actually knew a thing or two. We were well aware of how much of the events that had gone on and of the sketchy legal positioning it all fit within. He asked if we had ever received a contract, and we said we hadn't. He told us to get one from the HOA president under the pretense of trying to understand the fines and to give it to him along with every piece of correspondence they had sent our way that we still had. We got him these items, and then he asked us if we knew anything about dissatisfaction within the housing development with the HOA. We mentioned some of the grumblings that we had been hearing since the new HOA president came in, but they had ultimately seemed to go nowhere, so we didn't think they would be important. Our lawyer did some extra research through his paralegals, and when he came to us and told us we could bring them to court, his grin convinced us that we could win. It was child's play to prove that we were not part of the HOA. If the longevity of our property was not enough, then the proof that our home was still registered as farmland in the state and the HOA's contract was specific about overseeing residential land certainly was. The lawyer had found proof that the HOA president had even filed for permits to develop my farmland without yet having even ownership over it. He had obviously been trying to force me and my family out through his intimidation and fines. Fraud charges combined with our fines and the potential lien being dissolved. But our lawyer made it clear that to end it, it would be unethical. The lawyer presented the letters and the aggressive wording that came in, as well as mine, and my wife's testimony of the unceasing disrespect at the hands of the HOA president as signs of harassment and assault. Then he presented testimonies from homeowners within the HOA development that spoke of their dissatisfaction as many of the neighborhood's amenities were falling into disrepair and their HOA dues were not going down, at times they even went up. This and bank statements of the HOA that the judge requested be presented before the court showed that the money from people's dues were not going towards the projects that the HOA president claimed. A large chunk of the funds seemed to go towards personal accounts and separate investment projects the HOA president was involved in. The judge ruled that the HOA president was guilty of fraud, harassment, and embezzlement. He requested reparations for me and my wife, as well as all those who had paid dues to the HOA during the period of time when embezzlement had been happening. Due to the thorough corruption of the HOA at the hands of the president, the judge also ruled for it to be disbanded and for the members to be released from their contracts for free. Oh, and by the way, the pretentious jerk had jail time on top of fines that made my 15 grand look like Monopoly money. My sister paid for the legal fees during the case, but I've met my lawyer and bought him a drink every week since. He also gets some free products from my various farmers market stalls when he doesn't insist on paying and threatens to make a scene if we don't let him. And here, ripe stars, I'm glad that in the end everything turned out well for OP. I hope in the future these HOAs really stop messing with farmers. And if you still enjoy the stories about crazy HOAs, then please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments to show your support. Thank you so much. The next one is titled, "My wife, female 32, recently had wine spilled on her by my best friend, female 31, during our wedding. Now she is demanding that I, male 33, cut ties. So me and Ailey met through a mutual friend in 2012 during a pub quiz at university. I was quite attracted to her and actually told her so at the end of the evening, but she told me she had a boyfriend even though she was flattered all the same. Fast forward 3 years later, I met Eliza at the Edinburgh Fringe and we just clicked immediately. Politics, music, cinema, whatever the subject approach, there was a spark that I'd never felt with anyone else. Like, she just made sense with me, her personality was just vivid, it's hard to describe but I'll try. On first impression, she was so knowledgeable and enthusiastic, I was taken aback by her intensity. From that point onwards we were inseparable and I was dead certain of our future together long before we got engaged. Enter Ailey again. I start a new job at an advertising firm with a position in web design and she was one of the only people I knew. At first it was a little awkward given our history, especially considering that she was now married to the boyfriend she was dating back then. But there was no one else I knew at the firm and we both had partners at this point, so it couldn't hurt to be friends, right? And to be honest, I'm glad, because I feel like our chemistry as friends superseded any potential we might have had as a couple. She is clever and has a bit of a cheeky personality. I'm quite dry and sarcastic myself, so I reckon we have a pretty fun dynamic. Eliza does not seem to feel that way though. Sometimes when it's been the three of us, she has expressed a feeling of being left out or that Ailey has been making fun of her. I don't see it, it's just our dynamic, but there have been a couple of nights where Eliza's been in tears because of something that Ailey has said. One time Eliza got out of her seat and Ailey sat down where she was sitting to show me a video on YouTube. When Eliza came back in, she saw Ailey leaning next to me and was upset for the rest of the night. Sometimes there have been times when Ailey has said something that Eliza has read as a come on. Like when I said I missed swimming because I felt out of shape, Ailey said, "The two of us should go together," with a playful punch. Eliza didn't say anything at the time, but her discomfort was visible. Things really came to a head though on our wedding, and I think the stress of it really got to Eliza. During the reception, Ailey bumped into her and red wine spilled all over her dress. She was bawling the entire evening. We are now on our honeymoon and Eliza has said she hopes for a fresh start, but she feels like Ailey might have spilled her wine on purpose. She is suggesting that I cut ties with her, and if I'm honest, I'm not sure I want to. Where do I go from here? Comment number 1, the number of times I've bumped into someone and spilled my drink on them is exactly once in my entire life, and I was a crab-faced teenager. You are either astoundingly naive or Ailey is somehow the unluckiest woman in the world to accidentally spill her red wine on the bride on her wedding day. I think you know which one is more likely. Your wife won't be staying your wife for much longer unless you start actually listening to her and stop dismissing all of her fears as baseless insecurities. Comment number 2, I'll just say it to you straight. Take a step back and look at your post and comments objectively. See a pattern? You are constantly defending Ailey in regards to your wife. Why is that? Your wife is upset because of the jokes Ailey makes. Why haven't you asked Ailey to tone it down? To not make them to Eliza? You seem to be under the impression that Eliza should suck it up or not be so sensitive. Just because you are not bothered by those jokes doesn't mean that Eliza is not. Has Ailey apologized for spilling the wine? If it came down to it and you had to choose, who would you pick? This issue is because of your lack of attention towards the whole thing. You have known that your wife has had problems for years now with Ailey, and you have seriously done nothing? I'm sorry, but do you even want to be married to your wife? From your posts and your comments, it sounds like you and Ailey are in denial. Your wife is saying something to you, and are you not listening because you don't believe her, or is it because you don't want to lose Ailey? And now we got an update to the story, and it reads like this. You know, I posted here recently looking for guidance on how to deal with my wife's anxiety and hurt revolving around my friend, and it seems like I got read the riot act, probably rightly so. So I've been completely inconsiderate of Eliza's feelings and how she feels about these roastings, and you alerted me to the possibility that Ailey is doing this just to be a little crap. I sat down with Eliza and we had an in-depth conversation about the wedding incident. I got her to describe the event step by step in her own words. I was leaving the lobby into the dining venue, and Ailey was a little tipsy at this point and already stumbling from the bar. She was initially walking slower but seemed to speed up when she saw me. We collided into each other and she pulled an ashamed face and made a joke about me looking like Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl before scurrying away. She seemed embarrassed in the moment, but she didn't apologize to me. I heard from other people that she was appalled about what happened, but I never heard anything from her directly. It just paints a picture of habitual microaggressions from her that have festered into this ugly anxiety whenever she's around. I pretty much predict whenever I'm in her vicinity there will be weird behavior or uncomfortable comments, and I don't want to continue being in a situation where my husband brings someone into my home who resents me simply for existing. That was a real gut punch to me. For me, I always felt like it was just insecurity about me fancying Ailey for 10 minutes years ago, but Eliza is really torn up about this. She has said that the honeymoon has been miserable because the memory has been swirling around in her mind, and she feels like I'm gonna downplay or dismiss it. No one should feel like they cannot just be themselves, especially not at home. I did not realize what a craphead I'd been, and I apologized profusely to Eliza and decided to phone up Ellie to confront her about the wedding incident, so I did, and it didn't go well. Basically, I told her that Eliza was really hurt by the wedding dress incident, that she had been hurt by her behavior for a long time, and that if she cannot bring herself to apologize to Eliza's face at least, she could pay towards getting the stain removed. And if she couldn't bring herself to even do that, then our friendship had to stop. To say that Ailey was taken aback would be an understatement. She was completely blindsided, asking what was wrong with their interactions that made me want to go to such extremes. I mentioned the leapfrog comment and she went, "But even you call her that," stating that Eliza called her Garfield because of her weight and bright orange hair. When I mentioned that she ran towards Eliza and didn't apologize for spilling wine on her, she got really upset and started shouting that she was not running at her to hurl wine at her dress. She was running from her because she didn't want to talk at that moment because she feels like Eliza hates her and she doesn't know how to go about it. She started pointing out times when Eliza had been funny towards her, and I basically said, "Right, but this is not about when Eliza has hurt you. This is about when you've hurt Eliza and it's got so bad that it needs to be talked about." And she started laughing and it was really uncomfortable. I know she does this when she's anxious about something. Eliza asked me if things were okay from the other room and Ailey demanded if this was set up, and when I tried to explain myself, she hung up. Her husband even phoned me insisting that he would pay for the damage if it's less stressful for me. I told Ewan, the husband, that I appreciated that, but I needed to know where Ailey stood regarding what I just said. Ewan told me that Ailey makes jokes whenever she's anxious or uncomfortable, and that I've wrote about it in the past, but the wedding dress incident is a major issue and that he wants to smooth things over as much as I do. So him and Ailey will pay towards dry cleaning, whilst the condolences hamper is sent to Eliza. Finally, Eliza was relieved that Ewan was so understanding, but she wasn't thrilled about Ailey's reaction. Basically said that the Garfield comment was always about her hair and never about her weight, and that she was deliberately trying to make it seem like the bad behavior went both ways. I don't think it's went both ways either, because I've never noticed Eliza roasting Ailey in any real way. Eliza has suggested we try marriage counseling. I was a bit shocked at first because we've only been married a month. Anyway, I decided maybe that's the way forward, because if Eliza reckons that we need counseling for it, then it's clearly a problem. So yeah, me and Eliza are gonna try marriage counseling, and my future with Ailey is uncertain. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.